Hello and welcome to my channel Code 911. In this video I'll be discussing how to use MySQLi extension in PHP. Some of those who are following old tutorial might be using MySQL extension and would have encountered error saying that it will be removed in future and all. The error looks like this: deprecated MySQL underscore connect. The MySQL extension is deprecated and will be removed in future. So to do away with this, we will use MySQLi extension, but we have two options: MySQLi extension or PDO extension. But at first, let us quickly revise how do we use MySQL extension, as this will help us in quick understanding. Here is the code using MySQL extension. First, let me tell you what I am trying to do in this code. I'm trying to display a table in PHP page. The table looks like this. It has 4 records and I'll be displaying them all on the PHP page. This table is a tutorial table of the database test. So now let's see the code. In the beginning, I include a database info PHP. This file contains my host name, username, password and database name. So what do you do when you use MySQL extension to communicate with MySQL? Basically, you do all of it in 5 steps. Firstly, you create a database connection. At second, select a database to use. Third, you perform a SQL query. Fourth, you use the result. And fifth, that is at the last step, you close the connection. How do you create a database connection? You use the function MySQL underscore connect. Please note that in this function you pass 3 parameters, that is host name, username and password, and a connection object is returned and you store that. Please remember that you pass on 3 parameters in MySQL extension, as you will be passing 4 parameters in MySQLi extension function. So now coming to the second step, you select your database and you pass 2 parameters, the database name and the link which was created above, and then you perform the query if it is successfully executed. Please note that the error function, the function which is used to catch the error, is MySQL underscore error. While using MySQL extension, this function asks no parameter, but in the MySQLi extension it will be asking 1 parameter. We will see to it. The third step is performing an SQL query. You perform an SQL query, you pass the query and then you pass the connection object, and if the query is successful it returns, else you can list the error. Now the fourth step, I am using the result. Basically I am creating a table in the dev container. Here I have written the class just to use the CSS. I am fetching the data $row equals MySQL underscore fetch underscore array. It will fetch the result and then I close the connection at last. So these are all 5 steps we are using. Now I will tell you a function that will help you to suppress this display of error. Any kind of error which is displayed on your browser, on your page, can be suppressed by the function that I'm going to tell you. So the function is ini underscore set, and you need to pass two values. The first is display underscore errors. You need to set this to off, so off. That's it. Let's save it and refresh our page. See, the displaying of error has been stopped, but this is not the solution for which we are looking out. You have just stopped the display. Your code still has errors, and your database is still vulnerable to attacks. So this is not appreciated. So now I'll tell you about MySQLi extension and PDO extension, and we will learn MySQLi extension in this video. Now I'll discuss the two extensions that we can use to carry out the query with the database. The two extensions are MySQLi extension and PDO extension. MySQLi extension supports only MySQL language, whereas PDO extension has a great support for many database management systems. MySQLi extension supports both procedural and object-oriented style of coding, but PDO extension will only give you object-oriented style to use. The third point is about prepared statements. Both these extensions have a great support for doing the prepared statements. But let me tell you what a prepared statement is. It is basically dividing your conventional method of query into two steps. In the first step or the part, you send a basic template of your query which does not contain the data which you need to ask from the user. In the second part, you send the data entered by the user. In this way, you will isolate the query sent to the database management system from the user's input. So, effectively, you will make your data more secure from the SQL injections or any other kind of threats. So, both the extensions will give you a greater support in comparison to MySQL extension, that is the old extension used. Now it is deprecated, so you need to use any one of them. Now I'll tell you the basic steps regarding the usage of MySQLi extension. You can basically outline it into 4 steps involved. The first is about creating a database connection. The second is to execute the query. The third is to fetch the data and use it. The fourth step is to close the connection after you are done. Now we will see the code for MySQLi extension. Here is the code using MySQLi extension. In this code, I will be doing the same as I did in the last code. That is, I will display the results of the query in the table form. Firstly, I'd like to tell you that I'm not using any kind of ini underscore set function to suppress the errors. So now let us begin with MySQLi extension. I told you that it requires basic 4 steps. That is, first is to create a database connection and then so on. So let us do the first step. The first step is to create a connection, and for that we use a function MySQLi underscore connect. It requires 4 parameters: host name, database user, database password, and database name. If you are working on a local server, then host name could be localhost, or it could be anything else that you might have set. Database user name and password. This is basically the username and the password that you have opted in MySQL, and this DB is database on which you are working, the database in MySQL. So this function returns an object which represents the database connection. In this video, I'll call this type of object as connection object. This function is quite similar to MySQL underscore connect, which we have used here, but the difference is here we used only 3 parameters, but in MySQLi extension we have passed 4 parameters. So passing fourth parameter basically merges the first two steps of MySQL extension into one. Earlier you had to first create the database connection and then select a database, but in MySQL extension you will do both the things in a single step. So here here it is now one step less. Then you will check if your connection was successful or not. If by chance your connection is not successful, then this function will return a false value, a bool object of false value. So this if block will be executed, and we use a die function. What a die function do is that it will display a message, and after displaying the message it will exit or quit from the current running script, so that all these statements will not be executed if this connection we have created here is not successful. We use the function MySQLi underscore error and we pass a parameter. This function basically returns a string which has the description about the error that has took place. So this parameter is nothing but the object which was returned from MySQLi underscore connect, the connection object. Now coming to the second step, we perform our SQL query. For that we use MySQLi underscore query function and pass 2 parameters. The first one is the connection object and then the query. So this function returns an object which represents the result. We used a similar kind of function in MySQL extension too, but here we passed the parameters in the opposite order, that is the reversed order. We passed the query first and then the connection object, but now in MySQLi extension we'll be passing the connection object first and then the query. So this returns a result object. We'll check for the error in the same manner. Then when there is no error, we will proceed and use the result. So here is the HTML code to display the table. Here is the PHP code. Now what am I doing is I am fetching each row of the result one by one in the while loop. I'm using MySQLi underscore fetch underscore array function to fetch each row of the result, and it takes the result object that was returned by MySQLi underscore query function. Now this function returns each row as an array of strings, so that you can use. The array consists of all the attributes of that row. So you can access the first attribute like this, just as you access any element in an array. So you can display it. Now I have used the data, I'm done with it. So now I'll close the connection. I'll close the connection using the function MySQLi underscore close and pass the connection object as same it was done in MySQL extension. So The prime differences are the first two steps have merged into one. You are passing 4 parameters in MySQL underscore connect. The error function now requires a parameter. Earlier, it did not require any parameter. Now it does require. Nah, and then the second step, the order has reversed, and then it's just the same. Now we will run it. MySQLi.php, and so here it works. Everything is fine and it is working without any error or any deprecation message. It is just fine. If you like my video, please click the like button and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.